From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Ahead today from the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Katelyn McCullock will provide her insight on the cattle market trends. She'll look at the possible impacts of worsening exchange rates with Mexico on U.S. beef sales into that country. Then the new director of the Kansas Agriculture in the Classroom program, Nancy Zenger-Beneda, will talk about some of the initiatives she hopes to bring to that program. Also, the first of our daily wheat harvest reports, courtesy of Extension agricultural agents around Kansas, starting today with Jenni Carr of Harper County. And Jeff Wickman with this week's 4-H segment. He'll talk with Jake Worcester of the Kansas 4-H Foundation about the COVID-19 4-H Resilience Fund. All that here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
You are tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. As we get into the cattle markets now, and we welcome in Katelyn McCullock. Katelyn is the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center in Denver, and she'll lend a few perspectives on what's going on in the trades, and we have quite an assortment of things we'd like to cover today, Katelyn. But let's start with a brief recap of this past week's cash and futures trades. How would you characterize the trends?
Well, live cattle Friday morning, it looks like it was trading just above $1, so it's capping off another week of trending lower. The week before, the 5-area averaged about $1.04, and that's really the third or fourth week that we've seen declining cash values. The futures market continues to be volatile, but it too is struggling to show positive gains in any sort of consistency. In terms of feeder cattle, the Southern Plains averaged higher than the previous week last week, with 700 to 800 pound steers coming in at $137.71. So a pretty big jump there, about $7 a hundredweight from the week before. When we look at the cutout, that's also been trending lower. Choice values started the week at $228 last Monday and ended the week at $214. So again, more depressed values in that sector as well. And that's really been following the increase in slaughter basically in step. We've seen box beef cutout come down as slaughter levels have continued to climb.
We've harped on boxed beef trade for quite a while now. First, when the market soared, now it's obviously been sinking for several weeks. And where the bottom is in that trade, that's becoming somewhat concerning, isn't it, Katelyn?
Well, it's definitely a good question where the bottom is. And I think quite a few factors are going to play into this. So even a lot of times we're looking at slaughter levels, but we have to keep in mind that dress weights are way above last year, about 40 pounds, over 40 pounds higher from last year. And so we have more meat per head being slaughtered. You have the headwinds of the U.S. consumers still looking at a fairly weak economy. There were some positive numbers that came out in the middle of June with advanced retail sales showing a better bounce back than the previous month. But I don't think any of those numbers point to being out of the woods economically by any stretch. We'll probably still likely be in a recession in the near, medium, and potentially long term. And all of those are going to weigh on that cutout value and the consumer's ability to purchase high quality beef and to purchase a high level of beef as well. Grilling season tends to be a good market for beef products as well as the fourth quarter. So, we have some seasonal upward trends here that could pay off. But ultimately, the economy to me is going to be one of those overarching themes that could affect how low we see the cutout value and its staying power through this time.
Well, you mentioned those hefty slaughter weights, and that's another thing that's been tracked closely, slaughter volume, cattle movement through the system as plants had opened back up. Is the industry getting closer to being caught up on the flow of cattle, Katelyn?
Well, the estimated total cattle slaughter number that came out Friday was above 600,000 head, and it has been for the last 3 weeks. Saturday kill levels have been quite large, and it's indicating that the industry is finding ways to make up for any decreased capacity that's related to chain speeds, the introduction of different PPE systems. And so what I would say is that even though slaughter is still below a year ago, it's about 98% last week of the year before, I'd like to highlight that this is still requiring some fairly active management by packers and feedlots. So yes, we're getting closer and closer to 100%, but it's with people in the industry paying very close attention to how we're managing through this. A couple of things I would highlight is that heifer slaughter is still down last week, about 13% below a year ago. And that's much lower than what steer slaughter has been. And I think that's indicative of feedlots sending those very heaviest cattle through the supply chain first and maybe letting those heifers stay on feed a little bit longer. And as I mentioned before, dress weights are still, I think they were 46 pounds above last year, last week. And so we're not really quite out of the woods yet, but I would say the industry seems like they're doing a decent job of working through it.
Well, add to the story then the USDA's monthly Cattle on Feed report, which was posted this past Friday. As you glance at those numbers, what are they telling you, Katelyn?
Well, Cattle on Feed does seem to be, after 2 months of below a year ago placements, the placement number did jump up even above what analysts expected. We were down about 1%. One of the things I looked at in this report was which states saw the large increases. And from Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas both saw a large placement jump from the previous month. But Kansas was really the only state to post a year-over-year positive change. The weight breakdowns also included positive year-over-year changes across the U.S. in the two lightest weight categories. And the higher placements in the Southern Plains were thought to have come off wheat pasture, and those breakdowns indicate that a significant number of those animals entering feedlots were over 800 pounds. The fed cattle marketings were well below a year ago, largely because slaughter levels were below a year ago as well, and so you couldn't market those animals maybe as quickly as you normally would. But overall, this pointed to feedlots placing animals at a more normal type of level than we've seen the last 2 months, and that's likely because the outlook for when those animals would come out of the feedlot has significantly improved. And so I think there's some possibilities to make some somewhat slim margins possibly on those cattle being placed, but we'll have to watch it through the summer. This could have been too a little bit of bounce back in May. I'm not sure June will see a positive year placement change, but that will ultimately, I think, depend on what the drought looks like in the Western U.S., which has looked quite dry for a while. If we look at typical weather patterns, monsoonal flow through the southwestern part of the state, that's those afternoon rains that come through almost every day. The intensity and duration of that seasonal flow is ultimately going to help shape what those pasture conditions look like, the ability to hold cattle out on grass, and ultimately what you might see in placement levels through the summer. So still a lot of things up in the air on the feedlot sector, but overall, it seemed that the report was an indication that things have improved for feedlot owners and that the industry is working through some of these challenges.
Do want to include something else. You finished up an article, you say, on exchange rates, currency exchange rates of the U.S. with Mexico that is of interest to the cattle sector. Explain what this article was about, if you would, Katelyn.
So the U.S. dollar in relation to any of our key trading partners is a relationship that moves around quite a bit. But when we're talking about a global economy that is struggling to come out of coronavirus, with different countries having potentially weaker or slower economies than at a different rate than the U.S. is, different stimulus policies, it's important to see where those currencies fall in relation to each other and compared to where they have been. So Mexico is a very key trading partner, not just for beef, but other products as well. The relationship between these currency rates are influenced by all kinds of events. But in a simplistic sense, those relative strengths will tell us how much more or less expensive goods are compared to a different time frame. So in January to the May time frame, the Mexican peso fell 25% relative to the US dollar. So that's a very large currency movement. I didn't go back and actually calculate it, but I would say that rivals the change we saw back in 2008. And what that means is that all else equal, products that are exported to Mexico just became a lot more expensive. And so that's going to be a headwind moving forward for U.S. exports going down to Mexico, is that consumer now has to pay a considerable amount for possibly the same quantity in the previous year. Now, these things move around a lot, and there's both price and quantity trends that could affect them. So you can't necessarily look at it as a complete offset from where you would have been. But the challenge is that this is a big market for the U.S., and a 25% currency move is a very large move. And what you usually will see is a decrease in quantity purchase then. That could be a pretty big impact on ag products moving there. A couple things to keep in mind, though, is these aren't set in stone. So it's relative strengths of these two economies. And the U.S. Federal Reserve has been doing quite a bit of stimulus in the U.S. economy. Mexico, too, has introduced their own stimulus policies for their economy. The International Monetary Fund estimated that Mexico was going to have a GDP loss of over 6% in 2020, and they put the U.S. at just under 6%. So both economies are facing significantly weaker economies than the year before, but where they fall relative to each other might depend on some of these stimulus policies. Now, the U.S. stimulus policy does incorporate some inflationary pressure moving forward. Overall, we'd expect the dollar to weaken based on these stimulus packages, which could be potentially good for exports to Mexico, but it's all a relationship. So depending on how fast the Mexican peso weakens or strengthens relative to the U.S. dollar will all come into play. And so it's a complicated issue, but it becomes a big issue for exports from the U.S. And then if you're importing goods from Mexico, they actually became quite a bit less expensive. So if you're a feeder cattle importer, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Merits monitoring, there's no doubt about it. And Katelyn, thanks for the insight, and we'll catch up again in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Katelyn McCullock, the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center. And just to point out to you once again, that center is a project co-sponsored by several land-grant universities, including Kansas State University. We'll be back with more on this Agriculture Today.
Kansas farmers and ranchers are helping feed your family in the world. The largest contributor to the Kansas economy is beef cattle. How do you get that juicy steak on your plate? In order for you to enjoy your tasty meal, it requires the hard work of the producers, marketers, advertisers, processors, inspectors, transporters, packers, and consumers. So thank all these people and sit back, relax, and enjoy your tasty meal.
We're back now on This Agriculture Today, and it's our privilege on this part of the broadcast to introduce to you the newly named Executive Director of the Kansas Foundation for Agriculture in the Classroom and the programs that it supports around Kansas, introducing agricultural themes into our educational system. She is from Republic County in the north-central part of the state, near Belleville, to be more exact, and Nancy Zenger-Beneda is with us. Nancy, congratulations on the new appointment, first of all.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for taking some time today to give me an opportunity to get to meet your listeners and also talk about what we do with our program and our efforts to reach educators and share our message about agriculture.
And letting folks know something about you, you have quite a broad experience actually in education at the community college level, correct?
That's true. I started with Cloud County nearly 16 years ago as a full-time speech and English instructor, and then through my time there, I moved through various roles. I spent a short time as the Ag Department Chair. Then as a Division Dean, I had the Agriculture Department under my supervision. Then, of course, as a Vice President, my responsibilities grew, and I was the Vice President of Academic Affairs in my most recent role there. Pretty actively involved in the Agriculture Department throughout my stint, and a couple of things that we did there that I'm particularly proud of is our new Precision Ag program that is talking about how we use technology in agriculture. And then also, since about 2007, we worked to build a new agriculture facility or a livestock facility so our program could be more hands-on. And that did go under construction this last year. So really glad to see the Cloud Ag Department continue to grow.
So you obviously have a working knowledge of agricultural education. And we should note as well, before we talk about the program itself, that you are a rancher on top of all of this.
I am. I grew up on our farm, spent my life working cattle with my brothers and my dad, and my husband and I have a small cow-calf operation now, and find that to be an important part of what we do, and proud to contribute to the industry, even though it's just in a small way.
Very well. Well, now you have taken the reins as the executive director of the Foundation for Agriculture in the Classroom program, which is based here in Manhattan on the Kansas State University campus. And what attracted you to this opportunity?
Well, when I saw the posting, it seemed like the perfect fit for me because I'm very passionate about education, and I believe it is through education that we change the world. And I'm very passionate about agriculture because we need to feed people and provide resources to care for people. And, of course, energy, I think, is also connected to our natural resources in agriculture. So it brings together two things that I'm very passionate about, and in a way that I can share that passion with other people. So from the time I saw the ad posting, I felt like it was a perfect fit.
And to let folks know, you've been on board for only a couple of weeks or so you're learning the ropes a bit as well, are you not?
That's true, and I've been so excited already to be so proud of the work we're doing. Just last week, of course, we've gone through a number of changes because of the COVID situation, but we started recognizing our outstanding teachers of the year. Our national organization recognized 8 teachers across the nation with National Excellence in Teaching of Agriculture Awards, and we had a Kansas teacher recognized just this last week. Her name is Patricia Wolf, and she's from Paola, and she's doing just some fantastic things. And getting to know her and learning her story, which you can learn about if you take a look at our National Ag in the Classroom website. You'll find the video that describes her program, and then also a video of her virtual award ceremony. I was just immediately so proud to be a part of the organization, an organization that really is recognizing good educators and encouraging educators to really help young people learn about the ag industry and the influence that it has on their lives. You know, for many young people now, they're 2 or 3 generations removed from agriculture. And right now, we're seeing a window where people are seeing shortages in the grocery store, or they're seeing interruptions in the food supply chain. And we have a window to really talk to people, to young people, about where that food comes from, where they might actually be willing to listen to that message. And so I'm really hoping to capitalize on that and spread our message and get more educators involved in what we're trying to accomplish.
So the opportunity is ripe. Do you have a specific vision for the program then as you take these new duties upon you?
Well, the vision of the organization is ag in every classroom every day, and I couldn't say it better myself. I wholeheartedly believe in that message. So it's easy for me to jump on board and say, we want to reach more teachers, we want to reach more students, we want to reach more schools, and we want to see our program involved in all the counties across the state.
Under that umbrella, then, you can build the next iterations of the program. That's basically the plan at the moment, then.
Absolutely. Well, just to expand what we're currently doing by reaching more people, but then also we will continue to increase the resources that we have available, and we're finding that parents are interested in our resources right now as well as educators, because many of them are trying to educate their students or their young people at home. And so our resources are becoming even more valuable to those families or young families that are trying to educate their own young folks. Mm-hmm. And then also thinking about how we might expand some of our programming to even post-secondary education, and really talking with those teachers that will be coming out of the college so that they're thinking about how they will incorporate agriculture in their classrooms from the beginning. But then also I can see an extension of what we're doing in post-secondary education, specifically tied to agriculture, to help young people learn about legislation that's involved in agriculture and how it specifically impacts the industry. And so if you've got young people that have been involved in agriculture education, say through their secondary educational experience, it seems like the natural extension of that would be then what's happening nationally that impacts education. So I can see us growing in that direction in the future.
So you have ideas in the mill, it sounds. We should mention this as well because it's an important component of making this program tick. Agriculture in the Classroom is a nonprofit, so support of the program and all of those efforts that you described and whatever may be coming in the future is essential. And as we address the agriculture, agribusiness community today, you want to remind folks about that.
I appreciate you bringing that to our attention and reminding us of that because all of the resources that we provide are free. And so we do operate off the generous donations of people that believe in the industry and, of course, our ag industry partners. We're so thankful for them because we know that educators are strapped on a tight budget and sometimes can't do all of the things that they want to do. And so one of our primary goals is to help make that happen.
As far as the immediate agenda, one of the things you did want to mention while you were here, Nancy, you've teacher grants to be bestowed somewhat soon. What are those about?
We do have new teacher grants right now that are for $500, and they are for new teachers, first-year teachers that are needing to buy supplies for their classrooms. Those applications can be found on our website, and they are due June 30th. And we hope that we'll have some young teachers out there hear this message and get those applications in because we know they're going to need some supplies to kick off that first year of teaching.
And they can pursue that by going to this web address, ksagclassroom.org. June the 30th is not that long from now. You'd like folks to look into that as soon as possible.
That would be great, and share that message. So if you know someone that is looking to start teaching in your local school or your area, please help them be aware that that grant is available because those few dollars could be pretty valuable to them.
So, Nancy, you're on board now. We've a new school year, hopefully, unfurling here in the not-too-distant future. So you and your staff will be working to develop new curricula ideas and basically prepare for that very soon now.
That's true. We're working to develop some pre-services and then also some in-services because part of our mission in reaching students is also helping teachers get the professional development they need to touch those students. So we'll be looking to help teachers prepare for that fall start.
All of the program's resources are fully displayed at ksagclassroom.org. If you haven't checked out that website, by all means do so. Nancy, congratulations again on the new appointment. Looking forward to working with you from time to time here on this broadcast, letting folks know what's up and to the moment as far as agriculture in the classroom in Kansas. Appreciate you coming over today.
Well, thank you, Eric. And again, I appreciate the time to sit down and chat with you and share with your listeners our vision and our hope for our program and our organization. And we hope that your listeners will be interested in joining our cause and helping us support the agriculture industry.
And it is as timely as it ever was. Thanks again. Nancy Zenger-Beneda, and she is the new executive director of the Kansas Foundation for Agriculture in the Classroom and the programs that it supports. Again, ksagclassroom.org is where to go to check out anything and everything to do with this highly important and highly successful program. You're listening to Agriculture Today. After the break, a look at today's agricultural news headlines for you. And Jeff Wickman awaits with this week's 4-H segment. Still ahead here on the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Welcome back. You are listening to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. And today we launch our series that we put out there every wheat harvest season in Kansas as we go around the state day to day and visit with county and district extension agricultural agents about how harvest is progressing in their locations and the results that they're observing as they talk with their producers. And we'll start with a report from South Central Kansas, and specifically Harper County. Extension Agent Jenni Carr. You were moving along pretty well with harvest in Harper County until recent days, Jenni.
That is correct. We got a much-needed rain on Friday morning, and again on Sunday morning, and again yesterday morning. We're up about 4.5 inches in parts of the county.
It'll be a while before harvest resumes. That's pretty obvious.
It will be. It'll be a few days.
Up to that point, how far along were you with wheat cutting?
Well, Eric, we were about 65 to 70% complete. A lot of that was dependent on not necessarily weather, but some of the wheat was not maturing as fast as the other varieties.
Any reason for that in particular that you can point to? Planting date or what?
I think that was primary planting date. I did have a couple producers comment that anything they had put fungicide on was maturing later, but that wasn't widespread across the county. I think that might have been just an incidental occurrence, but any of the later planted wheat is later maturing.
So, with 65, 70% cut, what sorts of yields, test weights are you realizing down there?
Eric, we have had a wonderful wheat crop this year. Our test weights have been all above 60. I have not heard of anything below 60, and they've been consistently 63 to 65 pounds. We have some protein of between 11 and 12, and yields have been wonderful. Mid-50s. There's been a few 40s and even some 60s and 70s, but consistently mid to high 50s for yields.
So those are solid numbers. To what do you attribute to that success this year? Anything in particular?
I think we had a cooler spring, and that helped with that grain fill. We did not turn hot until the week before we started harvest.
The disease pressure must not have been terribly much, or your producers got on top of that with fungicide treatments. Was that the case?
Yes. We did have some rust presence, but most producers have just automatically put that in their toolbox as we're going to put on a half rate early and then another half rate in the later part of the rust season. So I think that helped a lot for our disease issues.
Your producers are quite happy. Is there going to be an issue with getting this last 30% out of the field, though, do you think?
I don't think there will be. The only thing I see that might possibly happen is have some weed pressure in the fields, and that also can affect your stockage as far as moisture and foreign material. But I think we'll get it. I've not heard one producer complain about the rain because our fall planted crops needed the moisture and our pastures. And we'd only been harvesting 2 weeks, but I think everybody was okay with a small break.
All right. And because you've had moisture now, once that wheat is fully taken off, do you foresee anybody taking a run at a double crop right after wheat?
I do. I do think, especially some of these guys that are done or very near done, because there was talk about if we don't get any moisture, we're not going to double crop anything. But I think this opens up another window for some beans and milo to be planted.
That'll help with a little revenue on that acreage. But you're chalking this up as one of the better harvests that you've witnessed as the agent in Harper County for some time?
Yes, it is probably. I've been the agent here for 8 years, and it's probably the best harvest we've had since I've been here.
So it's one of the brighter lights that we've seen in an otherwise strange spring and early summer.
Yes, strange spring, early summer, if we could just get that price back up.
Very well, Jenni. Thanks for the update. We appreciate it, and good luck to you and your producers in wrapping up harvest in Harper County very soon, hopefully.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Jenni Carr is the Extension Agricultural Agent in Harper County, South Central Kansas. To round out this segment now, with headlines from DTN on agricultural stories, the report is that China does plan to accelerate purchases of U.S. farm goods to comply with the Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. following talks last week between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his Chinese counterpart. China intends to step up buying of everything from soybeans to corn and ethanol after purchases fell behind due to COVID-19 disruptions. That's according to two sources familiar with the matter as they reported to Bloomberg. Bloomberg. This would confirm the expectation cited by U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer in congressional testimony that he expected China to live up to their commitments to the deal and that their purchases of U.S. agricultural products would be rising soon. Bloomberg reported that through the first 4 months of 2020, China purchases of U.S. agricultural goods were at $4.65 billion. That's well shy of the total of $36.5 billion in agricultural products China committed to purchase from the U.S. in 2020. Another source cited in this Bloomberg report indicated that Chinese state buyers were being urged to make all efforts possible to meet the Phase 1 trade terms. The U.S. officials and trade sources have continued to maintain that they do fully expect those purchase commitments to be met. They've also reminded that China has also taken many actions on other trade issues that were covered in the Phase 1 agreement. And a panel of Ninth Circuit Court judges denied that emergency motion to halt dicamba use and to hold the EPA in contempt of court. That ruling on Friday. That decision an important win for the EPA, which obeyed the Ninth Circuit's June 3rd order to vacate 3 dicamba registrations, but did allow farmers and commercial applicators to continue applying the existing stocks of XtendiMax, Ingenia, and Fexapan through July the 31st. This means that EPA's existing stocks provision still stands, and growers can continue using any stocks of those herbicides in their possession as of June the 3rd, as long as they follow the former federal labels and any existing state regulations on dicamba use. However, the legal battle over dicamba is far from over. The Ninth Circuit is permitting both BASF, who owns Ingenia, and Corteva, which markets Fexapan, to join Bayer as defendant interventors in the case. This is important because on June the 16th, BASF filed a motion asking the court to recall and stay its original mandate, vacating the registrations. The judges have given the plaintiffs until June the 23rd to respond before they rule on that request. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Next up, we'll have our weekly 4-H segment. Jeff Wickman brings that in a moment. This is the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. The Kansas 4-H Foundation has raised more than $100,000 to meet the critical and immediate needs of Kansas 4-H youth during this global pandemic. Kansas 4-H Foundation President and CEO Jake Worcester says the COVID-19 4-H Resilience Fund will support current youth programming efforts and emphasize the development of sustainable programming. Jake, tell me a little bit, first of all, about how the idea came about and then how you managed to raise so much money in a relatively short period of time.
Well, sure. Obviously this time has been a bit crazy and a bit unexpected, not just a bit unexpected, very unexpected. And, people, I think, overuse the term unprecedented, but in our lifetime anyway, my lifetime, this truly is unprecedented, what has happened with COVID-19 and the way it's impacted our ability to be together or not be together, and certainly the way it's impacted our 4-H clubs. And so at the Kansas 4-H Foundation, our mission is to raise and facilitate private resources that support 4-H across the state. We obviously put our heads together and said, what can we do in this time? Our donors still want to find ways to help. They're asking how to help, and our 4-Hers are really digging in. And really the idea of the Resilience Fund came out of the great work 4-H members were doing in being resilient in this time. They were finding creative ways to connect. They were doing project work in different ways than they ever had. And yet at the same time, it was obvious that additional resources were going to be needed. And we wanted to use this as an opportunity, one, to give our donors an opportunity to help, obviously, and to contribute toward the cause, but to also identify ways that we could develop additional resources that not only helped in the immediate response, but built resilience in the organization itself so that in the future, as we encounter things we don't even know about yet, hopefully we're better prepared and more resilient as an organization, not just as individuals. And so that's how the idea came about. We looked at those opportunities, and then we approached our board of trustees, our volunteer leadership for the foundation, and said, we'd love to do this. And so we went to a few of those board members and said, would you be interested in making a major gift to a matching fund that would encourage people to double the impact of their gift? And so we had 4 of our trustees step forward and said, we will do that. And through that process, we raised a $50,000 matching fund. So the $50,000 that was raised from the general public in the month of May was all matched dollar for dollar, which is what allowed us to get to that $100,000 mark.
Now, do you have an idea of exactly how the funds will be used, and is this going to be kind of a grant or funding type opportunity?
We do have lots of ideas on how the funds will be used, and in fact, some of them are already at work. And the way in which the funds will be distributed is we've designated approximately half of that total amount for the state 4-H program and another half to Rock Springs Ranch. Rock Springs, of course, being the home of our state 4-H camp experience in the summer, and this summer not having camp, obviously for the first time in 75 years, we aren't having camp at Rock Springs, and that's been a significant impact from an operational standpoint, but more so we're looking at the missing opportunity to bring young people together from across the state and have the experience at camp you can't have anywhere else. And so we're already putting those funds to use and developing some virtual camp opportunities. It doesn't replace the opportunity to come together, but it does give young people an opportunity to learn, to experience the outdoors, to think about the way in which they interact differently. So that's gone to use on that side. And then on the 4-H program side, again, we're looking at what type of virtual opportunities do we need to develop. The state 4-H program has been actively engaged with counties in which the traditional fair experience is going to be different, or the fair has entirely been canceled this year. And that fair experience is important for 4-H because it's really the culmination, the showcase of that project work, the opportunity to demonstrate what 4-Hers have learned. And so identifying and creating alternative ways to showcase project work is important to us. And then, really we've broken that support down into 3 primary areas. One is volunteer and professional development. What resources do we need to get in the hands of 4-H agents and 4-H volunteers across the state so that they can better execute project learning and community club activities in different settings? Right now that tends to be virtual, but even thinking in the future, how might that look different than the traditional club meeting? We're looking at truly virtual opportunities. So what has to happen virtually so that 4-H can be experienced and grow and be an impact constantly, even when young people can't gather together? So we're looking at those kinds of things, and already are at work funding some of those, and we'll fund more. And in July, we'll be reporting back on many of the impacts that we've been able to have through the Resilience Fund.
This is interesting because in a way you're almost developing 2 programs. You've got the face-to-face that you will do when you can, but then you've also got, when circumstances present themselves, a way to do it virtually.
That's exactly right. When we really think about what makes 4-H as a program resilient, what we identified in that process was the ability to adapt, the ability to take a challenge and find a way to persevere. And, 4-H members have been doing that for 115 years. It's kind of at the heart of 4-H is this idea that we look at a problem and we discover how together to solve it. We put caring adults with youth and discover together, learn together so that we can solve problems. Well, this was an organizational problem and one that no one really anticipated. And so we're looking at what do we need to do to develop and implement really strong, impactful programs and resources that can be utilized in a variety of ways. So when it's face-to-face, how do we enhance the programming we already had that's face-to-face? But then if we encounter another time, say there's a second wave of COVID like many of the experts predict in the fall, we'll be better prepared in that instance to go to a more virtual setup, and we will feel the ability to adapt to that more readily. I think that's the key to what we're trying to do through this fund, is to just build that resilience. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we certainly anticipate that someday there will be another challenge that we haven't even thought of yet. And if we can build adaptability and resilience into our programming, we'll be more prepared when that eventual challenge surfaces.
If people want to find out more about the foundation, or if they want to donate to the foundation, how can they do that?
The best way is to come to our website, and that's at Kansas4hfoundation.org. And certainly we love when individuals care a lot about 4-H and recognize that a strong 4-H program is valuable not only to the youth in their community, but their communities as a whole. And so we would welcome their engagement there. You can also find us on your typical social media, or just give us a phone call. 785-532-5881 is the number of our main office, and we'd be glad to visit with you about your interest in providing philanthropic support to 4-H.
That's Kansas 4-H Foundation President and CEO Jake Worcester with an update on the COVID-19 4-H Resilience Fund. Again, for more information, visit kansas4hfoundation.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.